Have you taken an Uber before? I sure have, as have a lot of people. The driving service has become more popular than a regular taxi. One of the main reasons being their competitive pricing, and the fact that you can read reviews of other passengers about your driver before you book them. But at the end of the day, what do we really know about the people that drive us around? And how safe are we with them? Let's talk about it. Jason Dalton was 45 years old and worked in the office of an insurance company. To make some extra money, he started working as an Uber driver, a job he would only have for 2 weeks before tragedy struck. On the 20th of February 2016, Dalton would not only change his life, but also that of many more people. It was a normal afternoon when Dalton got into a silver Chevy to start his part-time job. He even took his little dog Mia along for the ride that day. Dalton's first passenger, a college student, actually sent him away that day because of his dog. His second passenger, Matt Mellon, didn't have a problem with the dog, and he got into Dalton's car shortly after 4. He and Dalton talked a little, but nothing more than small talk, until Dalton got a call. While the call was on loudspeaker, Matt didn't pay attention. He later couldn't even tell police if the caller was male or female. Matt only remembered that it was a short call, and afterwards, it was like Dalton had changed personalities. He pressed down on the gas and started speeding across town. This call, which shifted something in Dalton, came from his wife's phone, as police later found out. On the phone was Dalton's teenage son, and all he asked his dad was if he wanted chicken wings. But something had snapped in Dalton, and he went into a blind rage. He drove into the oncoming traffic multiple times, drove over a stop sign, and crashed his car into a Ford Taurus. Matt, meanwhile, was scared for his life. He tried to talk to Dalton, but all Dalton did was to deny that he did anything wrong. Matt begged him to stop and let him out, but he ignored him. Dalton kept driving into the oncoming traffic and drove over multiple red lights. Little Mia in the backseat, meanwhile, had crawled under Matt's chair, whimpering. The entire time, Matt later said, Dalton acted like all of this was normal. Matt continued to beg to be let out, but all Dalton said was, "I thought you wanted to go to your friend's house." At some point, Dalton slowed down to ask Matt where exactly his friend's house was, and Matt used that moment to jump out of the car. A neighbor that had seen Dalton race along the street and then seen Matt jump out of the car alerted the police. She told the operator that an Uber driver had just kicked a passenger out and was driving like a crazy person. She even described the exact car to the operator, but whoever was on the line didn't take her serious. Matt also called the police, who only pushed him from one operator to another. He, just like the neighbor, hadn't been taken serious either, something that would prove fatal for many people. He then called his girlfriend, who immediately made a Facebook post warning people about Dalton and describing his car, telling people not to pick up a drive with him. Jason Dalton meanwhile drove home. He drank a glass of water, went into his basement, and got his loaded gun. He also put on a bulletproof vest before getting back into his car. It was in that moment he called his wife and asked her where she was. He wanted to change cars, use his wife's Hummer instead. But that car was parked in his parents' driveway, who had traveled to Florida. His wife, on the other hand, had the keys for the Hummer and was still out with the children. She, who had of course no clue what happened, offered to meet him at his parents' house. But before that, Dalton picked up another Uber drive. A girl named Macy ordered an Uber for her boyfriend. She accidentally put in the wrong address, so after a while Dalton called her. Macy said he sounded perfectly normal and just asked her to describe the address, so she did. Then there were 10 minutes of radio silence where Macy constantly sent him messages asking if he found it. Police later said that it's very likely that Dalton was looking for a female passenger and drove past Macy's boyfriend multiple times because the account was running on her name. Lee Allen, Macy's boyfriend, was waiting at his stepmother's house. She was standing on her front porch. She actually saw Dalton drive past her house multiple times, but she didn't know that he was there for her stepson. She said the following: "He seemed really aggressive. He was standing close to some trash cans, and when I walked towards him, he pressed down on the gas pedal and nearly drove me over. My first impulse was to flick him off. Thank God I didn't." Macy, meanwhile, was still texting Dalton, but he wasn't answering. He had spotted his first victim. He saw a woman in a park leading 5 young children towards the playground. Dalton approached her with the car and asked her if she was Macy or Misty. The woman told him her name was Tiana Carhutters, which made Dalton drive off. But he immediately turned his car back around. He opened his window, grabbed his gun, and started shooting at Tiana. Lee Allen actually heard the shots from where he was standing, while his girlfriend was still texting Dalton. Tiana saw the gun and immediately told the children to run. She tried to run too, behind them to shield them. She was hit 4 times. 2 bullets hit her legs, breaking one. One hit her arm, and the last one lodged itself into her liver. When Dalton drove off, he was sure he just killed someone. But Tiana didn't die. She held on. Neighbors found her on the sidewalk, and even though she was badly wounded, she gave them a detailed description of Dalton, the car, and even the fact that a dog was in it. Multiple people were now calling the emergency lines, telling them about what had happened. One of the operators actually remembered Matt's call from before and called him back, asking him to describe the car again. And Matt even sent them Dalton's Uber profile. But all of this was lost in the chaos. A tragic fatality, because the police could have easily located Dalton via the GPS that all Uber drivers had in their app. Dalton meanwhile raced back to his parents' house, again running over multiple red lights and crashing into several cars. When he arrived there, he parked his car in the garage to hide the damage. When his wife arrived and gave him the keys to the Hummer, it wouldn't start. So Dalton decided to instead take his wife's Chevy. His wife later told the police multiple versions of this encounter with her husband. First, she claimed that he told her he had had trouble with the cab guys, and he had talked to Uber and they would take care of it. She also said that her husband told her to stay inside the house, but she claimed her husband acted calm and normal. A few weeks later, that version changed. Now she claimed that he told her a cab driver had shot him, and he gave her a loaded gun and told her that she couldn't go to work and the children not to school. She also said that when she asked him what was going on, he told her she'll know when she watched the news that night. Carol, that is his wife's name, later said that he was on the phone when she arrived. He told her that he was calling in the damage to either Uber or the insurance company. But that was a lie. He was actually on the phone with Macy, who he thought he had shot before. Macy had called him because of some malfunction the Uber app had charged her for Dalton's drive to his parents' house. Macy later said they had had a discussion for about 3 minutes when he said, "Sorry, I don't have time for such things anymore. I have better things to do, and you're wasting my time. And I just cannot do this anymore. Call someone else to drive you." After Dalton left his wife and children, he drove back to his own home. The neighbor's daughter later told police that he stood in his driveway for multiple minutes before driving off, doing a U-turn, and parking in his driveway again, before finally driving off. When the police later searched the house, they found a clock used to shoot Tiana in the garage. It had jammed. But Dalton had a replacement, a Walther P99. At around 8:02 p.m., he picked up another passenger, Keith Black. He got him safely to the town center. As Keith later said, the two even held some small talk. Another passenger later said that Dalton was singing along to the radio. Dalton brought 3 passengers to the city center from their motel. The app had another malfunction then, and the charge for the ride couldn't be processed, but they said that Dalton told them not to worry about it. They all said the same thing. He did his job as if nothing had happened. Tyler Smith, 17, his girlfriend Alexis, also 17, and his father drove to a parking spot of a local car dealership at 10 p.m. Father and son got out to look at some cars because they wanted to start a business together. Alexis stayed inside the car. What happened then was recorded by multiple security cameras of the car dealership. Dalton arrived at the car park and circled it before parking his car in front of the dealership office. He approached then father and son. Alexis later told police that Dalton asked the 2 men what they were looking for. The only thing Tyler and his father were able to answer was, "We are looking," before Dalton pulled out his gun and started shooting them. Alexis then hid behind the backseat of her car. Another witness told police that Dalton kept on shooting the men even after they were on the ground. Dalton then tried to get into the BMW that his 2 victims were laying next to, but the doors were locked. Alexis waited exactly 90 seconds before crawling out to her boyfriend's body to get his phone. At 10:08, she called the police. Mary Lou, Mary Jo, Dorothy and Barbara, all over 60, and Abigail Kopf, just 14, had made their way to the Cracker Barrel car park to get back into their vehicles after watching a Chinese acrobatic show. 4 of the women entered one car, while the 5th, Mary Lou, sat in her own car. Dalton later said he went to the first car and asked the woman for $1. After she asked him why, he told her it was to make America great again. She declined, and he said he shot her in the head. By the way, a neighbor later said that Dalton had no allegiance to any party nor their running mates. He said that Dalton told him Trump, Bernie, or Hillary. Who the hell am I supposed to vote for? This sentiment was later supported by his friends, who said Dalton liked neither Republicans nor Democrats. So no one really knew, to this day, why Dalton used Trump's slogan. Dalton told police that he planned to run away after killing the woman, but he then heard the other 4 screaming in the car next to him. So he shot them too. He even told the police the exact order he shot them in. First, he shot the woman in the driver's seat, then the person behind her, then the person in the front, and then the one behind her. Then he left. The police now sent out an alert warning people of a man in a Chevy. Shortly thereafter, they said that all 5 women were dead. But that wasn't quite right. 14-year-old Abigail, who was also shot in the head, was declared brain dead in the hospital. She was put on machines to keep her body alive to get her organs. But then a miracle happened. Abigail's heart and lungs started working again. Only a few weeks later, Abigail could start talking again. Her first word, pig. Not for Dalton, but for her own pet pig, which awaited her owner's return. After shooting the woman, Dalton returned home one last time. His neighbor, Jim Block, later told police that he was worried when he heard shots being fired on Dalton's property at around 11:20 p.m. Dalton later said he had only shot his garden shed. Afterwards, he returned to his car, but not before reloading his gun. Everything Dalton did that day is hard to explain, but nothing more so than what he did now. After shooting 8 people, he started driving passengers again. All the while, a manhunt was going on for him in the entire county. Dalton safely drove multiple people to their destination. All of them later said he was acting perfectly normal. One of them, Derek, a law student, had heard of the wild shooting happening in the city. He, his wife, and his in-laws were in town to see a concert, and they had planned to walk back to their hotel. But after the waitress warned them about the shootings, they decided to call an Uber. Dalton's Uber. Bizarrely, Derek actually talked to Dalton about the shootings. He even asked Dalton jokingly if he was the shooter, to which Dalton only said no. While he later said that Dalton seemed tense, they did have a normal conversation. And Dalton dropped them off safe and sound. They were Dalton's last passengers. 37 minutes after midnight, Sergeant Harrison spotted the Chevy with Dalton. 2 police cars stopped him and 4 police officers arrested Dalton. When Harrison asked him if he had any weapons, Dalton just stared off into the air. And so ended the manic rampage of the Uber driver Jason Dalton. Not in another bloodbath, as many police officers were fearing, but silently with no resistance. But while this ended his rampage, the police, the people of Kalamazoo, and Dalton's family and friends still had no answer as to why he did what he did. One of Dalton's best friends later told interviewers that Dalton had acted completely normal in the days leading up to his crime. The same thing was told by his wife. The only thing both of them mentioned was that he seemed tired or sad. After his arrest, police declared that Dalton more or less admitted his crimes. He was calm and more or less cooperative, but he showed no sign of remorse. He also, at least that's what the police made public, didn't explain why he did it. After his name was made public, some people came forward that had interactions with Dalton in the past. Some of them described him as being easy to anger, but that he also calmed down fast. Other people, like the owner of a gun shop that Dalton frequented, described him as being very friendly. 3 weeks after his arrest, the police publicized a report about Dalton's interrogations. And as it would turn out, the police hadn't been honest when they first claimed he didn't explain his crimes. He told police that when he opened the Uber app that day, the 20th of February, the screen had lit up with the symbol of the Freemasons, the Eastern Star. After that, he saw a devil's head. Dalton claimed that the phone was able to take control of people, and the devil's head took control of him that day. Now, Dalton only told us after refusing to explain his crimes 22 times. Other than that, he was more or less cooperative. He denied having any mental afflictions, and he also denied being part of any militia. Police later said that even though he could describe everything he did, he mixed up a lot of it. In the police report, it even said, Dalton told us he was no killer, but he knew that he had killed people. As it turned out, Dalton even had connections to the Freemasons. His grandmother was part of the Eastern Star, and his grandfather was a member of the Freemasons. His mother told the police that he had questioned her about the Freemasons weeks before he went on his rampage. His wife told police the same thing. When Dalton was arrested, the only thing he wanted to do was to call his wife. He didn't say anything to her and hung up as soon as she answered. Later, he told the police that he just wanted to make sure he hadn't killed his family too. His wife filed for divorce only 5 days after his arrest. After what he said, he was of course seen by a psychiatrist to make sure he could stand trial. This is what Dalton told the psychiatrist after he asked him if maybe his mind had played tricks on him when he saw the devil. I asked myself the same thing over and over, and now it gets complicated. In that moment, I felt as if something was happening to me. I'm not sure what it was. In my cell, all I can think about is if I had only imagined those things, or if they were real. Psychiatrist declared him fit to stand trial. In the pre-trial, Dalton had another meltdown when one of his victims testified, Tiana Carhatters. When she described how he had shot her, Dalton started screaming, saying, "No." They were giving out bags. These old people, they have these black bags. They are black bags, which they drive around with. And people just watch them. It's gonna be bad. It's time for people to see. And then they tell them to go to the temple. After that outburst, he actually tried to get out of his handcuffs, and he constantly shouted at Tiana, telling her to take, while making a gun motion with his hands. He was of course taken out of court and afterwards was only allowed to watch via video. 3 years later, the main trial started. Up to that point, Dalton had tried to plead incapacitated, but his lawyer pulled that back on the first day of the trial, mostly because the psychiatrist declared him sound of mind. And then Dalton surprised everyone. He pleaded guilty. He didn't want a deal, and he also didn't want to tell a jury his side of the story. His lawyer said that he didn't want to put his family or his victim's family through a lengthy trial. On the 5th of February in 2019, he was found guilty of murdering 6 people. He will spend the rest of his life in prison, with no chance of parole. So what do you think? Do you think he planned the whole thing and later tried to play insane? Or was he really mentally unwell? Did he really see the devil that day? I hope you liked this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you again in my next video.